Hello, welcome back to Lady Lovestead Reads. My name is Jessica, and this is my October and November 2024 reading wrap-up. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not, welcome back. Glad to have you here at the Lovestead. I typically read one of two types of books. On the one hand, I really like dark, twisted, and depraved stories. And on the other hand, I really like cozy, whimsical, and light-hearted stories. So most of what I read is going to fall into one of those two categories. If you are considering reading any of the books that I talk about, please do check your trigger warnings beforehand. I don't share triggers because I think that they're spoilery, so make sure to do your research before diving into any of the books that I mention here today. I rate my books on a 5-point scale, with 5 being the absolute best, 1 being problematic. Anything that's a 3-star or higher, I do recommend. And then lastly, I found it easier to break up filming this into multiple sessions instead of trying to sit down and do it all at once. So you're going to see outfit changes, angle changes, and things like that as I go through the video because I film the separate parts on separate days. Without further ado, let's get into the stats. Let's start with stats for October 2024. I read 8 books, and that came out to be about 1,896 pages, not too shabby. 4 of them were horror, 2 mystery, 1 nonfiction, and 1 thriller. 4 of them were adult, and 4 of them were middle grade. And that is because I participated in a readathon called Halloween, which is a readathon hosted by Storm at Storm Reads for October, and it's just where you participate by reading spoopy children's books, essentially, specifically middle grade. And I do think that she had some specific prompts and maybe a bingo board. I didn't use any of that. I just tried to read as many spoopy middle grade books as I could for the readathon. I had a great time. It's actually my favorite readathon of the year. In terms of my goals for the year, only one author was a marginalized author, and I didn't do very well on trying to get 50% of the authors being marginalized voice in some way, whether it is a BIPOC author, someone from the LGBTQIA plus community, an author with a disability, right, so on and so forth. I try to read marginalized authors and read from marginalized voices 50% of the time, and I definitely did not hit that in the month of October. In terms of reading down my own shelves, I read 4 books from my shelves, which was pretty good, and I actually increased my read to unread ratio to 42% of my books read. So I increased it a whole percentage point in October. Unfortunately, in November, that goes back down because I bought a bunch of books and it canceled out that progress. The Lovestead buddy read for the month was Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. My average rating for the month was 3.8 stars, which is a pretty decent rating for a month. Anything above 3 or above is a book that I would recommend, so a 3.8 average is pretty good. My favorite book of the month was 13s by Kate Ellis Marshall. Let's go through November stats. In November 2024, I read 6 books, 1,909 pages. For genres, it was 1 fantasy, 1 horror, 1 mystery, and 3 nonfiction. 4 of the books were for an adult audience, 1 was young adult, and 1 was middle grade. I didn't read any marginalized authors in November, which is not great. 3 of the books came from my own shelves. So the percentage of read to unread books, right, of my own TBR, trying to get to 50% read by the end of the year, it's not going to happen. I started at 40%, and at the end of November, I was at 42% read. So I still have been making progress, just very slow. My average rating for November was a 3.8, and I did participate in some readathons. So the first readathon I participated in was Nonfiction November, just tried to read a handful of nonfiction, which I did. And then the second one that I participated in was Sugi's readathon, which is hosted by Jessie at Jessie on YouTube. I did find a new all-time favorite book, and it is Practicing the Way, Be with Jesus, Become Like Him, Do As He Did by John Mark Comer, which is a Christian nonfiction. It was, for obvious reasons, my favorite book of November. Okay, let's do a couple rounds of MASH. When I talk about the actual books that I read, I like to play MASH, which is a numbers game we played in the 90s that predicts your future, things like the house you'll live in, the job you'll have, who you'll marry, and things like that. So I have 4 categories. The first is house, where I choose which setting I would want to be in. The second is job, where I choose which job from the book I'd want. The third is romantic partner, obvious, and the fourth is family, where I choose like which family or friend group I would want to be a part of from the books that I draw. So I draw 4 books. This particular video, I have 14 books. So I'll do 3 rounds of this, and 2 rounds will have a wild card, which can fall into any of the 4 categories. I have my little apothecary jar with all the books in it. Let's go ahead and draw the first round. I'm also doing laundry, so I'm sorry if you hear that noise in the background. Small Spaces by Katherin Arden. Welcome to Camp Nightmare by R.L. Stine. Slow Productivity by Newport. Heartless by Marissa Meyer. And the wild card is 13s by Kate Alice Marshall. Small Spaces by Katherin Arden. This is a middle grade horror. And in this one, oh gosh, I'm having trouble remembering what it's about, but I think it's these scarecrows that are hunting down this friend group. All of this middle grade horror that I read in October is kind of blending together in my brain right now. And I pulled 3 of them in this round, so I'm just gonna look it up. Right, so this one, okay, so Ollie suffers a tragic loss, finds solace in books. So she finds this book, and it's a story about a girl named Beth and the 2 brothers who loved her, and a peculiar deal made with the Smiling Man, which is a sinister specter who grants you your most tightly held wish, but only for the ultimate price. So she goes on a school trip to this farm, and on the way back, the bus stops, and the driver gets out, and she's like, what is going on? The driver says, best get moving. At nightfall, they'll come for the rest of you. And then the scarecrows that are on this farm kind of come to life, and it's horrifying. This is actually really creepy. Really creepy, scary, spooky for a middle grade. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a well done middle grade horror, and I didn't have like anything negative to say about it. It's a fun time. I listened to it on audio, and the audiobook was also pretty good. I gave it, what did I give it? I gave it 4 stars. So yes, I enjoyed that one. Obviously it didn't stick with me, but it's honestly because it was so similar to 13s and also Welcome to Camp Nightmare. Those 3 had some really overlapping themes, and some scenes even were like identical. So I think they're all getting melded in my brain, and I'm having trouble picking apart which is which. But yeah, so Small Spaces. It is the first book in a series called Small Spaces, and I will continue with the next one at some point. For MASH, I picked Friend Group because this friend group really works together to figure out what's going on and to survive the night. Welcome to Camp Nightmare by R.L. Stine. I believe this is book like, I don't even know, 7, 8 in the Goosebumps series. And in this one, a young boy goes off to camp. It is a middle grade horror, and he goes off to this camp called Camp Nightmare, and all these spooky things start happening, including with the bus driver, which overlaps with Small Spaces. So the bus driver does something weird on their way there, and he like stops in the middle of nowhere. And anyway, they arrive at this camp, and then all these scary things start happening at the camp, and the kids start disappearing. And then there's a twist at the end that I did not see coming at all, and it was a jaw-dropping moment for me. I really enjoyed this book a lot, especially because of the twist. Up until the twist, it reads just like a normal, like, horrifying camp adventure, and the twist, though, it's something. It really is something. I thought it was brilliant. I gave it 4 stars, and for MASH I picked setting, but I can't tell you why I picked setting because it will give the twist away. So you're just gonna have to read it, and then we'll chat about it in the Discord. I do have a Discord, it's linked below. Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. This is an adult, like, self-help, businessy style book. It's about learning how to slow down your productivity to make it a more enjoyable, less stressful experience, to reduce rates of burnout and that kind of thing. And I didn't like this book. It didn't work for me. I gave it 2 stars. All of the suggestions would only work if you have complete control over your time, if you can hire people to help you. Like, none of what he said is actually applicable to the average American worker. So gave it 2 stars. But for MASH, I picked Job because I love a job where these things could be applied. Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is, I forgot to mention too that I read all these middle grade horror for Storm's readathon called Halloween that happens every October, where you read middle grade horror. Okay, Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is a young adult fantasy, and I read this for Sugi's readathon hosted by Jessie on Jessie at YouTube. This is the origin story of the Queen of Hearts. So it's a villain origin story, it's tragedy, but it also reads very cozy. Now this was published in, like, I want to say 2016, and let me just verify that. Yeah, 2016. And it reads very much like a 2016 YA fantasy. And I enjoyed reading this. I buddy read it with my friend Angel over at Angel Reads. And we both kind of agreed that, like, it was very 2016. Very 2016 YA fantasy. Kind of felt a little fluffy at times. Not a lot of meat and potatoes to it. Just basically sheer entertainment. It does have a lot of, like, literary references, which is fun. Like, it references Edgar Allan Poe and Shakespeare and some other literary references, and it's very heavy-handed on the Alice in Wonderland-ness. So if you want something that's, like, light on Alice in Wonderland, this is not for you. This is very heavy-handed when it comes to, like, the Alice in Wonderland parts of the story. And I think I gave it like 3.5 stars, where, you know, it's good. It's middle of the road, good to pass the time, entertaining, a little bit heartbreaking at the end, some quotable moments, not a lot. And if you like Alice in Wonderland, you might really, really love this. I do really like Alice in Wonderland, and I loved the Alice in Wonderland components of this story that made it really fun, and I think that kind of bumped the enjoyment up for me. If you don't love Alice in Wonderland, you're probably not gonna like it. For MASH, I picked Romantic Partner because Jest is just a sweetheart. And then the wild card, 13s by Kate Ellis Marshall. This is a middle grade horror, and I did read it for Stormy's readathon Halloween. In this one, it's a group of 3 friends, and they're basically trying to figure out this curse where a bunch of 13-year-olds go missing every year in this community. And there's a lot of, like, puzzles to solve and a lot of, like, riddles and things like that. And I would actually compare this to the Winter House series by Ben Guterson, the way that they're solving these riddles and puzzles and things like that. And I really loved this book. I thought it was so much fun. I loved the characters. The plot was, like, fairly fast-paced and edge of your seat kind of a feeling. And I thought it was really appropriate for middle grade readers. Loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. For the wild card, I picked Friend Group. Once again, this group of friends is just so cute in the way that they help each other solve these problems and survive this curse that's going on. All right, let's draw the next round. A Dark and Twisting Path by Julia Buckley. Sign Here by Claudia Lux. Out of Range by CJ Box. Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. And the wild card is Bunnicula by James and Deborah Howe. Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is an adult horror, and this features Peyote, who is someone who died and went to hell, and now he works for hell, trying to get humans to sign contracts to give their souls to hell when they die in order to get something while they are alive on Earth. And so his job is just to collect these contracts. And this, I would compare it to like a modern day retelling of the Screw Tape Letters, sort of. in that, you know, it's looking at what causes human beings to fall from grace, essentially. And it follows a specific family and all of their dynamics, because this family over the centuries has always had someone sign a contract. It's just kind of what the family does. So you get Peyote's perspective, you get the family's perspective, they come together. And I mean, this was fun, and I thought as a book on its own, it stands alone pretty well. And the characters are interesting. I feel like they could have done more with the plot, and honestly I feel like it's a missed opportunity to do more with like the theology and the philosophy behind all of these plot lines too. I mean, a lot of it was just very thriller-esque, and I wanted it to go deeper because, like I said, it was such an opportunity to really explore like what makes humans choose to do bad things, what would make someone choose to sell their soul. And it just didn't do that. It didn't. It felt fairly surface level, fairly just entertaining and thriller-esque. And I just wanted more out of it. So if you don't want more out of it, you might really like that. If you do want more out of it in terms of like philosophy and theology, I would say just read the Screwtape Letters. I think that's better than this one. It's a classic for a reason. I think I gave this one like 3.5 stars. For MASH, I picked Friend or Family Group because it was the only thing left out of all the options for this selection. I wouldn't really want to be in the Friend or Family Group for any of this book, but it's all I had left. So I guess I would try to befriend like the daughter in the family or something like that. A Dark and Twisting Path by Julia Buckley. This is book 3 in the Writer's Apprentice Cozy Mystery series. In this one, Lena's best friend Allison finds the mail carrier unalive, and then they have to solve the murder. And it was a pretty standard cozy mystery. It had the cozy elements. This one's set in Blue Lake, Indiana, and Lena is the main character. Lena works as a ghostwriter, and she actually lives with her boss Camilla, who is a really well-known gothic literature mystery thriller writer who's hired Lena to write with her. And while it sounds like that might be kind of weird to live with your boss, they actually have a really, really precious relationship, and it's all sweet and good because that's what cozies do. Cozies are all sweetness and goodness, and just with this puzzle to solve, which is the mystery. And I mean, the most I can say about it is it's like a pretty standard cozy mystery. And this one does focus also on this overarching mystery that's going on with Lena's boyfriend Sam, and kind of brings all of that together and honestly brings that mystery to a close. So it leaves you kind of wondering where are they going to go from here in the series, because that arch is finished. I gave it 3 stars, and for MASH I picked Romantic Partner because the police officer in this, whose name I can't currently remember, I think he's fairly swoon-worthy. I actually would prefer Lena pick him over Sam. Out of Range by C.J. Box. This is book 5, I think, in the Joe Pickett series. This is a crime series, and the main character, Joe, is a game warden in Wyoming. And in this one, he gets called to go over to like the next county over because that county's game warden is not alive, and Joe has to take over his duties for a while until they find a replacement. And when he gets there, he sees that all is not well in this town, and that there's something really strange going on with this game warden's death. And like it's just one of those head scratching kind of mysteries. As you're reading it, you're like, I really don't know what is going on here, because there's issues with people being drugged, not being in the right state of mind, and saying things you don't know if it's true or if it's not true, and like a lot of head scratching in this one. I could not have figured out or solved this by the end if I had tried. I didn't really try, I just was kind of going along for the ride. But it's a really well crafted mystery because you just can't figure out what the heck is happening. really like this series. It's a Western series. I've learned it's considered a modern Western series. I really like the setting of this. I love being in kind of that mountain area, woodsy area, and just getting to go along with Joe as he does his job as a game warden and spending that time in nature and things like that. It gives this series kind of a cozy feel to it, even though it's technically really not a cozy series. It's quite dark. The battery on my camera just died, and I'm not sure where I left off in talking about this book. Long story short, I gave it 3.5 stars, or maybe 4 stars. Can't really remember. I'll take better notes for my next wrap up, I promise. And for MASH, I picked setting because I love the setting in Wyoming and being out in nature and kind of going along with Joe as he does his job as a game warden. Happiness Falls by Angie Kim. This was the Lovestead buddy read for the month of October. It's an adult thriller, and it's about this family, and they have in their family a son who has autism and Angelman syndrome, and he is non-speaking. And he and his dad go for a walk. He comes home, but his father does not. And so this book explores what happens when you have someone who has this kind of a disability and is non-speaking, is suspected of murder. What happens in the court systems, and also is a juvenile, and also COVID is happening at this time. So there's a lot going on here. This really is a great book if you like psychology, especially cognitive psychology, because it really gets into like what does it mean to be non-speaking versus non-verbal, what's actually going on in their head. Like, it is very interesting from that perspective. I gave this 4 stars, and for MASH I chose job because there's this like speech therapist, an occupational therapist that the son is working with, and her job looks really, really interesting. Something that I would like to do potentially. And then last, the wild card for this round was Bunnicula. This is a classic middle grade horror, and it is about this little bunny, this little vampire bunny, and his name is Bunnicula, and he sucks all the color out of fruit. And it's just so adorable. I just love it so much. It's told from the perspective of the dog. And the dog and the cat team up because they think the bunny is evil and might do something to harm their people. And it's adorable. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. I loved this book when I was a kid and read it. I gave it 5 stars. For MASH, I'd have to pick Friend Group. I'd love to hang out with these 3. Like, look at them. And actually one of my bunnies is named Bunnicula after this little bunny. Let's do our last round of books. Death Waits in the Dark by Julia Buckley. No Cure for Being Human by Kate Bowler. Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. And Spying on Spies by Marissa Moss. Alright, Spying on Spies by Marissa Moss. This is a story of Elizabeth Smith Friedman, who was a code breaker during World War II. And it basically discusses her life. Now, this is a middle grade historical nonfiction, and I ate this up. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I think because it is a middle grade, they had to really amp up the entertainment factor to keep kids' attention. And it worked for me. It worked for me. I think this is a way that I would love to consume more history. I really struggle with adult historical nonfiction, and it's just so dry and it just doesn't stick in my head. But this story was told more like a novel, and I ate it up. I loved it. Elizabeth Smith Friedman is such an interesting person. She had such a fascinating life, and yeah, 5 stars. So for MASH, I picked Romantic Partner because Elizabeth is really cool. And out of all the other 3, that's what worked best for that one. Death Waits in the Dark by Julia Buckley. This is book 4 in the Writer's Apprentice Cozy Mystery series. And I read this for Suki's readathon. Also, I read Spying on Spies for Nonfiction November. So this I read for Suki's readathon. And okay, so in this one, the overarching mystery that was happening with Sam, Lena's boyfriend, has basically wrapped up, so that storyline is done, and now we're left with just more standard like cozy mystery plot lines here. And what happens is there's like this friend from Camilla's past that ends up getting murdered, And so Camilla's like having to revisit her past and all of her friend groups and stuff to figure out who potentially did it. And this, I didn't like this one. So something happens in this one where Lena becomes an unreliable narrator because she's struggling with some mental health issues, and it was really kind of triggering. And like the unreliable narrator being the main point of view in a cozy mystery just doesn't work. I feel like that's more in line with like a thriller. And the series does continuously walk the line between thriller and cozy, but this one got pretty dark and darker than I like for a cozy. I didn't like that she was an unreliable narrator in this, and I didn't honestly love the way some of that mental health stuff was handled in the story. And so I gave this one 2 stars. For MASH, I picked setting because, you know, the setting of a cozy mystery is always super cozy and nice. No Cure for Being Human by Kate Bowler. This is her memoir, and it's about when she was diagnosed with cancer and told she had a very short time to live. I want to say she had like months to live, but then she does live, and her cancer is in remission now. And so she talks about like the emotional turmoil that she goes through with this, and she does write from a Christian perspective. She talks a lot about Christian practices and her research that she does. So Kate C. Bowler is a historian. She's a cultural historian, and she works at a university in North Carolina, which one is not in my head right now. But she talks a lot about the history of self-help and how damaging the self-help industry actually is and how unrealistic it is. And so in No Cure for Being Human, she's really just trying to suss out, okay, what does it really mean to be human and to have cancer and to have to try to live with that? And it's so good. It was so good. It was so good. Well, I listened to it on audiobook, so I can't really share any quotes with you, but if you like any of those topic areas, definitely give this one a go. I gave it 5 stars. For MASH, I picked Job because she's a writer and I love to write. And last, Practicing the Way, Be with Jesus, Become Like Him, Do as He Did. Is the angle weird here? Okay. By John Mark Comer. This is an adult nonfiction. Oh yeah, okay, so I read No Cure for Being Human for Nonfiction November. I read this for Nonfiction November. This is obviously like a Christian-based text. John Mark Comer writes a lot of Christian theology, but he does it in a way that's easily consumable. It doesn't go over your head. It's not super academic. And this book was life-changing for me. I hit a real low in November, a real low in November. I was dealing with so much mental and physical pain, and this book brought me out of it. It gave me a new way forward. New all-time favorite. Absolutely. If you're not a Christian, you probably won't like it. It won't be applicable to you. If you are a Christian, it's a must read. And I gave it 5 stars. For MASH, I picked Friend Group because this book is a lot about formation. And formation is like who we are because of our environment. So like what we consume in the media, what we read, what we watch, what we listen to, who we spend time with, and how all of those things shape us as people. And so I would want a friend group that practices the way with me. All right, so we've made it through my October and November wrap up. And I think overall, I didn't read a lot in those couple of months, but I feel like I read some really good ones, like really good ones. So I'll take it. October and November were struggle months for me outside of reading. They really were. Yeah, I'm glad I'm through them. I'm glad I'm through those months. I'm glad I'm in a better place now. Thank you for sticking with me because the vlogs were not exactly super lighthearted to watch, but thank you for sticking with me through those difficult months. If you just want to let me know that you're here, go ahead and leave me any colored heart emoji that you want. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye!